And we're now live. Madam City Clerk, just let me know when you're ready to go. Guess we have about 2 minutes.
Yes. It'll just be a few more moments.
Thank you, Camille.
You're welcome. I'm just trying to promote Mark to a panelist. There we go. I'm just waiting for Mark to rejoin. Okay, we should be good to go.
Thank you. Good evening to all. I'm Paul Doring, the Vice Mayor of the City of St. Helena. Welcome to our meeting of September 28, 2021. Shortly before our closed session meeting today, the mayor informed me that he had a family emergency to attend to and asked that I step in tonight, and I was happy to do so. Best wishes to him and his loved ones. I know I have to read a little paragraph relevant to COVID and the state protocols, and so bear with me as I read that paragraph. In accordance with Executive Order N2920 and guidance from the California Department of Public Health on gatherings, remote public participation is allowed. We will address the order in the following ways. Members of the public may not physically attend meetings. The City Council meeting will be live streamed on Comcast Channel 28 and on the city's website, barring technical difficulties. Those members of the public wishing to participate must do so remotely by Zoom electronic meetings in the following ways. By either logging on to the Zoom link located on the meeting agenda, please download the app to your computer or mobile device and entering the meeting ID, or by calling a listed number and enter the meeting ID. Public comment for City Council meetings will be accepted via email to this email address, publiccomment@cityofsthelena.org. All public comments must be emailed by 4 p.m. prior to our meeting. Emailed public comments will not be read out loud, but will be publicly available and attached to the online City Council agenda. Now, with respect to the logistics of telephoning and other things, I'll have Camille Garcia give us more information on that and on our interpretation services. Thank you, Camille.
You're welcome. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Okay, to participate in public comment by phone, please dial 669-900-6833 and at the prompt, enter 835-3134-0669. Then press pound, and during public comment, press *9 to speak. Tonight's meeting will have live Spanish interpretation. To access the interpretation, you will need to use the Zoom application from either your cell phone, tablet, or computer. Instructions on how to use the Zoom app are listed in English and Spanish on the agenda posted on the city's website. Once you join the meeting from the Zoom application, you will see a small globe at the bottom or top of your screen. Click on the globe and you will be able to access the live interpretation. Marcy and Claudia are our interpreters this evening.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I appreciate that. I just wanted to take a moment to let you know that we have another attorney sitting in for our city attorney, Ethan Walsh. Mr. Christopher Diaz is from BPNK, and he will be assisting us tonight. He is the city attorney of the city of Milpitas and the town attorney for the towns of Hillsborough and Colma. Welcome to our city council meeting, Mr. Diaz.
Thank you, Vice Mayor and Council. It's an honor to be here, and I'm happy to serve you tonight.
Yeah, I'll be calling on you in a minute for a closed session readout. And so right now, I think we will do a Pledge of Allegiance. And if you all will mute your Zoom devices, I can do that myself. If you join along with me, that would be great.
Just trying to get the flag.
And I apologize for not having a flag behind me. So next time.
Let me try that again. I apologize.
Do we happen to have a flag available?
Yes.
Cool. Nope.
I'm having technical difficulty. I apologize.
That's okay. We can use our imaginations. If it doesn't work, it's fine. There's one. We've got a flag. Thank you, Chief Hartley. Follow along with me.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, may we have a roll call for tonight's meeting?
Yes, Vice Mayor Doring.
I am here. Thank you.
Councilmember Shutel,
Here.
Councilmember Hall,
Here.
and Councilmember Hardy.
Here.
And for the record, Mayor Ellsworth is absent.
Okay. So, Madam Clerk, are there any changes to our agenda tonight that we should know about?
No, it will be as presented.
Thank you. Will one of my council colleagues make a motion to adopt our agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to adopt the agenda. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Hardy,
Yes.
Councilmember Shuto,
Yes.
and Vice Mayor Doring.
Yes, thank you very much.
Vice Mayor Doring, you're muted.
You are right. Won't be the first time. On to public forum. Thank you very much, council member. Members of the public are entitled to speak on matters of municipal concern not on the agenda during public forum. Each person's comment shall be limited to 4 minutes. Each person is entitled to speak on any non-agendized item only once at any meeting. Brief questions by council members for clarifications may be posed and answered, and council members may make requests that items be placed on future agendas. But in accordance with state law, no substantive discussion or action may be taken unless and until the matter properly appears on the agenda. So I'll look to Madam Clerk to see whether there are any, first of all, I'll open public comment to see whether there are any comments out there in the world.
Yes, we do have public comment. First name Carlotta. I am going to allow you to speak, and you should be able to unmute yourself and address the council.
Welcome, Carlotta.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Great, thank you. This is Carlota Sinato, Program Manager with the Napa County Bicycle Coalition. And I just wanted to briefly announce that next Wednesday, October 6th, is Napa County's Walk and Roll to School Day. And St. Helena has 4 schools that are participating in Walk and Roll to School Day: the primary school, the elementary school, RLS Middle School, and St. Helena Montessori School. And Walk and Roll to School Day is a very important annual encouragement event that promotes walking and rolling to school as part of a healthy, active lifestyle. So I just wanted to bring that to the council's attention and the community's attention. And I'm happy to provide our bilingual flyer and any additional information to whoever would be the appropriate contact at the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comment?
No further public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. So we did hold a closed session, a special closed session at 5 o'clock. And if our city attorney could do a report out on that meeting.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Doring. Yes, you considered one item in closed session dealing with a lease of a wireless facility. Direction was given to staff, but otherwise there's no reportable action at a closed session.
Thank you, sir. Okay. So we're now on item 6 of our agenda: reports by staff and city council, future agenda items, and AB 1234 reports. I'm gonna basically have people start queuing up. I'm going to start with our city manager. Then if there's others from the staff who have reports tonight, if you could raise your hand, that would be very helpful so we can sort of just queue up, and I'll call you as I see you. But certainly want to start with the city manager for any reports that he has.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Doring. Just a continued message on the importance of water conservation. We're almost through the end of this dry season. We're holding well, and the conservation is occurring in our community. It's very impressive. We want to hold the line on that and continue to focus on water conservation. Keep our fingers crossed that we receive some good weather this winter. But we'll be continuing to enhance that message in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you going to be making any announcements regarding St. Helena Hospital booster shots that are coming up? I don't know if you have that in front of you, or you can wait a little longer. I can come back if you want, if you don't have that queued. I just got a message, an email. I haven't absorbed it all, but we should at least get that out at some point. Maybe I'll move on to staff until you find that.
I do have a press release that was presented to me late this afternoon, and I can briefly touch on some high points here. So The St. Helena Hospital Foundation has announced the start of some booster doses. This is for those people that would be eligible under the approved criteria. And they also have COVID-19 vaccine first and second doses for anyone 12 and older. This is going to be taking place at Napa Valley Upper Valley campus at 1088 College Avenue in St. Helena. And what we can do is provide information on our website that speaks to some of the criteria and share this press release. And I'm looking for the date on this. This begins, the first clinic is going to be scheduled for September 30th at 10 a.m.
Thank you. I appreciate that report on short notice. I don't see any raised hands by any of our staff. Does anybody actually want to physically raise your hand? Does anybody want to report? Any of our staff members? I think it's just easier not to have to call out each one of your names. Just it doesn't look like anyone has anything. How about from our council members? Go ahead, Councilmember Chateau.
All
Thank
right, you're welcome. I wanted to report that I went to the California League of Cities, now called Cal Cities Annual Conference. I went with our city manager and also council member Eric Hall. As always, it was very informative. We went to, you could choose from too many good things, too many topics for us in local government, but items like wildfire safety, water conservation, affordable housing, short-term rentals. There was a lot of really good topics. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's a lot going on in cities around that. Climate change initiatives, electrical vehicle, charging stations. It was all there. So it was really good. It was the first in-person conference. Personally, it was a little nerve-wracking to be there and be inside. I often wore double masks. I would skip some of the bigger dinners. I just didn't feel comfortable doing that yet. But overall, I was really grateful to be there, and the city sent us there to learn, and I'd be happy to share with anybody that's interested all of my notes. The other thing I wanted to report on is we had our Upper Valley Waste Management Authority meeting. This was also in person outside up at Clover landfill flats. That was unusual. It was wonderful to be up there. There's an incredible view of the city. We can see the cameras that have been put up there for fire safety and early detection. That was right, we were sitting right near that. We also talked about, I don't have notes from that meeting in front of me. Sometimes we get a summary and I don't have that. But what I can tell you that I remember is there's a new great project that we approved that's going to be trash pickup. We're going to pay for that. We are working with I believe it's a nonprofit agency. It's a really cool program where this is a nonprofit and they do an internship for students. I hope I'm saying that correctly. But they give them a job and then they're also really good and do all the safety protocols that they need being on our Silverado Trail. They'll be along the trail picking up the trash for us and making sure that we get that away from the natural environment and in our streams. So that's something new. And that's all I have tonight.
Thank you, and thank you for taking the time to represent the city of St. Helena at this important meeting. I know there are some risks involved in that, but I do appreciate it, and I'm sure our council members in our city appreciate that too. Any reports or comments or requests from others? Councilmember Hall.
Thank you.
Floor.
Just following on Member Shuto's report out on the conference last week. It was 3 days. It was very good. It was really nice to meet a lot of our colleagues from across the state. I don't know how many people were there. There were, I don't know, a couple of thousand, maybe more, but lots of great sessions that were all pertinent. The only other thing I wanted to mention is the zoning subcommittee will be reconvening again tomorrow after a several week break, and we're looking forward to continuing to move that process along. I'm sure Maya may have a further update or Councilmember Hardy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall, and the same to you. Thank you for attending that meeting in Sacramento. I very much appreciate it. Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you, Vice Mayor
You do
Dorian.
have a hand up. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, I do have a hand up.
I wasn't looking up there. I don't know. I didn't see it. Go ahead.
I represent the public at the Groundwater Sustainability Plan Advisory Committee. Mayor Ellsworth is the city's representative, but I did want to mention that the committee is rapidly approaching the deadline for submitting a complete draft plan to the Groundwater Sustainability Agency itself. That's in Napa County, that's a board of supervisors sitting as a Groundwater Sustainability Agency. The committee's deadline is in November. The Groundwater Sustainability Agency must submit a complete plan to the State Water Board by the end of January. And so the second of two public outreach meetings held in the county is going to be in St. Helena at Napa Valley College tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. I wanted to make that announcement. I want to encourage everyone who can to attend. This is obviously a subject of great importance to all. It's one part of protecting and keeping water supply in Napa County sustainable for all beneficial uses and users. And public comment is really an essential, and public education, both, an essential part of that process. So that is my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hardy. I've been watching some of those meetings, and I'm very proud of your service to that committee. You've added quite a bit to our community. The input that you've been giving is extraordinary, so I do appreciate that.
Thank you.
I don't know if any staff want to chime in now. No hands raised, so I assume, okay, thank you. Planning Director, Maya DeRosa, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Hall. I do want to confirm that there is a zoning code subcommittee meeting tomorrow at 1:30 on Zoom, and we'll look forward to picking up the momentum. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't need to spend a lot of time on my reporting out, other than the fact that I attended a couple of virtual meetings, a housing workshop meeting held by the city, which was got a lot of good comments there. It's hard to tell how well attended that was. We have to maybe boost that attendance, but a lot of good comments from a variety of folks in the community. I also attended a virtual workshop on the roundabout project through MBTA and MTC. And the more I think about it, the more I am convinced that roundabouts make a lot of sense. I don't know if there's any information that arose from that meeting, but some of the videos that were shown, first of all, it was a first rate, one of the best Zoom meetings I've ever attended, put on by MBTA and MTC. It was an excellent meeting, and they had a lot of expertise and a lot of visuals in terms of what roundabouts do and how they can contribute to eliminating traffic congestion and promoting safety. So that was a really good meeting to go to. Just one request, I've been having just some internal dialogue with respect to the Meadowood, internal dialogue with staff, asking some questions about the Meadowood rebuild and how that relates to their water agreement with the city of St. Helena, to make sure that we are getting all the information that we're entitled to get from Meadowood as they pursue their rebuild with the county. There may be certain obligations that they have. So I would ask that maybe our staff just take a look at that and in a time that's appropriate for staff capacity in the next couple of months, come back to us and have a review of that contract and maybe some direction that we can give in terms of the input that we may want to give on that project. I don't know if anyone else is interested in receiving that kind of information or preparing ourselves to give the kind of direction that we need to give as an oversight body.
Yes, I think it's a good idea, Vice Mayor, and I would certainly support that.
All right. Thank you very much, Council Member. So we're 2 minutes on schedule, according to my estimated time. We're moving right into presentations and public recognitions. Welcome, Joaquin Razo. I see your picture. I don't see you. You're here tonight to give a brief presentation on the Blue Zone project, and welcome to the City Council meeting. Nice to see you again. I used to see you a lot more often in our chamber meetings, but here you are. Talk to us. Welcome to our city council meeting.
Vice Mayor Doring, thank you. And thank you to the other city council members and all the city staff and officials. Yes, I'm actually seeing a lot of people more in town since actually moving to town off McCorkle. So it's been great. And our offices are now open. We moved into 1422 Main Street, right under the Y down, the old centerpiece. So it's been great having that visual presence now as we begin the project. And I want to thank everybody for having me so we could talk about Blue Zones project. Coming to St. Helena, coming to the Upper Napa Valley as a whole, and honestly also acknowledging, that we are project powered by Adventist Health as well. So I'm just going to go into it. I don't want to take up too much time, and I'm just going to give a little bit of background about Blue Zones project, and how it kind of came to be within the Upper Napa Valley itself. So starting with a little bit of the history of Blue Zones and moving into that, it began back in 2004 with Dan Buettner, who is one of the founders of Blue Zones Project, and within a National Geographic Fellow and other researchers, kind of traveled the world and really found the 5 regions within the world that people lived the longest, the happiest, the healthiest. But also not just living longer, but also active. And the initial report was published within National Geographic in 2005. And there was a series of books that came along with it as well. And we can go to slide 4, actually at this point, which is fine. Perfect, that one. So the original 5 Blue Zones and the Blue Zones that are here today are within Okinawa, Japan, Ikaria, Greece, Sardinia, Italy, Nicoya, Costa Rica, and then also in Loma Linda, California. And within these areas, they found that, more than often than none, 3 times more likely to live over 100, living on average 12 or more good years. And I think the biggest thing about this is that people are active and they're healthy and they're physically moving still, living to these ages. And when we talk about this, when Blue Zones projects comes to a community and how Blue Zones, based on all of this, Blue Zones project came to be. And we are now in 58 different communities in the US. And we're not saying that we're coming in to change everything so that everybody is going to follow these rules and that everyone's going to live to be over 100. What we're saying is that we're creating a space for active lifestyle, for government policy conversations, for collective impact conversations about how we can create healthier options easier for everybody to help people live longer. Whether that's 2 years, adding 2 years, whether it's adding 15 years, it's going to be different for everybody. And making sure that we're able to apply based on the community, customized kind of applications. Going to the next slide, taking these 5 communities and learning about this really allowed us to create what we call kind of the shared traits of the longest living people. And we call them the Power 9. And they're separated into 4 sections. And one is move, and making sure people move naturally, physically, actively throughout the day. For example, if you and another colleague have a meeting and you don't need to be in front of a computer, how about we take that as a walking meeting around town or within a certain neighborhood or wherever that location is? How can we naturally integrate moving naturally throughout the day? And then also having the right outlook, knowing our purpose and understanding the purpose we have within ourselves and the conversations around that. And then downshifting, working less, slowing down, understanding that it's okay to put in that PTO request sometimes because we can get wrapped up in work very easily. And then eating wisely. We have a few kind of guideline support systems around that. Following the 80% full rule, stopping when you're at 80% full and letting, kind of your brain react to that. Incorporating a plant slant diet, more veggies, less meat and processed food. We're not saying people need to be vegan or pescatarian. We're just saying that how can we as a community incorporate more plants and veggies and have easier access to those and more affordable access to that in our diets. Wine at 5 or friends at 5, depending on the audience. With drinking a glass of red wine each day, red wine can be had health benefits. But with wine at 5 or friends at 5, and why we make it interchangeable is because it's more about the social connections and avoiding isolation, which happens so much even when within our aging population as well. And then connecting, creating that right tribe, quote unquote, creating a healthy social network, loved ones first, making sure that we put a prioritization on family and loved ones, and then also belonging and whether or not you can connect or reconnect with a spiritual purpose, and not kind of holding close to any denomination in particular as well. When we talk about the Blue Zones project and what the project is and how it separates itself out from what the Blue Zones are in the world, is that it's a community-wide evidence-based approach in terms of health and well-being. And I also like to incorporate the idea that it's also a collective impact model. We're not here to replace the work that nonprofits are working hard to do. We're not here to replace the work that government entities are doing. We're here to create a stronger connection for everybody to come closer to continue to have those conversations strong in a much stronger capacity. Without asking money from these nonprofits, without asking money from the governments for what we're doing. And sorry, we can move to the next slide. In the sense that we are, a fully funded project from Adventist Health on the West Coast with a strong connection partnership with the local Adventist Health St. Helena. From work sites to schools to restaurants to grocery stores. We kind of help just make small changes that contribute to kind of that bigger benefit for all of us within what we call as the next slide, the life radius, through people policy in place. It's a little different for us in Upper Napa Valley, knowing that where people work, we have so many people that commute in at the same time. But knowing that within 5 to 10 miles of a person's home, if they're living and working within Upper Napa Valley, that's where they spend their time. So through people, through one-on-one engagement, group engagement, community engagement, through working with local governments on different policies, and through understanding that built environment piece and the where we live and where we work, how can we fully support the concept of a life radius to improve one person's health and well-being, ultimately throughout all of that. A little bit on that last slide about our team. So myself, the executive director, I've been in St. Helena for about 4 years, coming from the chamber, and this is on the last slide. Fabio Maya, our organization lead, who comes from us actually from the local Adventist Health System, Nassim Moil, who's lived in St. Helena for over 20 years, and then Kelly Bond, who is our public policy advocate, and comes to us from Petaluma, actually. And so, and that's on the last slide. And so to kind of finish it off, I think for us, coming to the city councils, making sure the councils are aware of the participation that we hope to partner with more. We hope to look forward to a resolution of support when it comes to, public support from the city council. And also within that resolution, having a council member chosen by the 5 of you to sit on our steering committee to make sure that we have that communication, as well as we're asking the local city managers and then staff when it comes to conversations about built environment or food policy and tobacco as well. So I wanted to make sure I gave time for any questions. So that's kind of a very quick presentation. I'm happy to meet with you individually to talk more as well. But wanted to make sure that I was able to address any questions within the time frame allotted to this evening.
Thank you very much, Joaquin. That was an excellent presentation. Any brief questions from our council members? Do give some thought to potentially serving on the board that Joaquin just mentioned. I'm interested in that, but we'll take that up probably at another meeting shortly, and maybe in the next couple of weeks. Is that correct, Mr. Presswich?
Yes, we're planning to bring this back on October 12th.
Okay. Thank you very much, Joaquin, and have a great night. I appreciate it.
You too. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. So it appears that we do not have any staff briefings unless there's anything else for the good of the order by staff. No, okay. Moving on to consent items. That's item number 9 of our agenda. Members of the council or the public may ask that any items be considered individually for purposes of considering alternative action, for extended discussion, or for public comment. Unless that is done, one motion may be used to adopt all recommended actions. So just in a nutshell, consent is basically for routine matters where the intention is not to have a whole lot of discussion because there's not a need for a whole lot of discussion. There are staff reports on each one of these items. However, both council members and residents have the opportunity at this point to pull an item off the agenda for discussion. There appears to be 8 items, 9.1 through 9.8. And rather than calling out all those numbers, first of all, we'll go to the public, and then if council members also want to think about calling out one of these or calling it off the agenda for discussion, please let me know. We'll go to our clerk first to see if there's any requests from the public at this point.
There is no public comment.
I should note also on item number 9.6 that we did receive a fair amount of public comment. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 letters, either written mostly I think by email, but they're all here. I'm sure council has had an opportunity to review those. Are there any other council members wishing to pull an item? Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I was just thinking we should have a short conversation about 9.6 simply because of the number of letters that have come in.
I think that's fine. Before we get to that, maybe we have a motion on the balance of the consent items.
I'll move to approve the rest of the consent calendar.
I'll second.
So there's a motion and a second to approve the balance of the consent items with the exception of 9.6. Roll call.
Councilmember Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Shuto,
Yes.
Councilmember Hardy,
Yes.
and Vice Mayor Doring.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll look to the city manager to briefly introduce this and direct our attention to whatever staff member has more details. We can give a very brief report and maybe allow for public comment. We don't need a full-blown report. Thank you.
Sure. So just in brief, the Chamber of Commerce is looking to place an art installation at Hunt Avenue. And so as you recall, over the past year, for several months, we closed the Hunt Avenue at Main Street to Railroad, dubbed it the Hunt Avenue Hub. It was a place of outdoor gathering. We placed tables, etc., around that space. The chamber is looking for a spot to showcase a large holiday tree that is approximately 30 feet tall, approximately 18 feet in diameter at its base. It would still allow for some additional tables and gathering area, and it would be a lit tree. And the closure would occur between approximately November 22nd to January 3rd, that specific defined holiday shopping time. So I know that on our in our gallery today, and we have a couple of members of the chamber that are present. So the executive director, President Amy Caraba, and Vice President is also available to answer any more specific questions you have about this request. And the city would, I guess, go on to point out that the city would work on placing some additional parking spaces as we did 3 spaces in the back. We would need to also remove some parking spaces for turning radiuses associated with trucks delivering goods to Safeway, et cetera, and other businesses. just as we did before. I know we've had internal conversations about alternatives to the construction zone noticing that we did during the Hunt Avenue hub. We think there are some other ways of approaching that can be less intrusive. I know there's interest in that, and we can talk more about that if you'd like as well.
Councilmember Chateau.
I want to hear more about that. When you say construction, do you mean when you turn? That would be on 29 when we had all the cones and how that looked last time?
Right, it's really the southbound more than the northbound that we're looking at for opportunities to reduce the number of signs and cones. So is there a median solution that would allow us to close the median without the same amount of signage that we have before? We have to work with Caltrans on that, and happy to invite our city engineer to offer any additional comments on that front. But I'd say it's still early and we haven't had extended conversations on that yet.
That's correct. One thing we need to keep in mind is it's a Caltrans right of way. So if anything we want to put in there, it can't be too decorative, and it still needs to be safety focused, and it needs to comply with the TCD. So just a heads up. I don't know if I can get rid of the construction look, but we'll do our best.
Well,
Thank you so much. My other question was on parking. Do you remember how many spots we'd be losing and then how many we're putting back?
I don't, but we did do a report, an after report in the spring. I think perhaps the chamber remembers these numbers, but I believe it was a net of approximately 12 to 18, somewhere in that range. It wasn't too many. And within a couple of blocks of downtown, I've always been able to find parking spaces for myself.
Let's invite Amy Caraba to maybe do a brief report. I know Mr. Hall has a comment and a question, but let's see if Amy can shed some light on that and other parts of this project. Madam Clerk.
Amy, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome. You're good.
Thanks. We're so excited about this art installation. It's something we've been working on since early this year. This is an incredible art install. It's approximately about 160 wine barrels that are going to be stacked, 30 feet tall. It will be all lit. And the idea is that this will be a huge draw to St. Helena during the holidays, during this 5-week closure. What's so great about it is it ties in with our holiday wine barrel tour that we did last year. We had over 180 decorated wine barrels that were scattered throughout town. And there was a map, which was great during the pandemic when a lot of people weren't able to go out. As you know, this has been a little bit of this has been let's say a strong topic of discussion. I saw all the letters. I'm sitting here with a stack of letters myself that were sent to me from multiple businesses downtown in full support. The Napa Valley also writing a letter of support. And then we've got a couple of businesses that are directly affected on Avenue there. And the chamber is willing to do everything that we can to work with those businesses to make this easier for them. So last year, I believe we lost about 12 spaces. We did have those extra additional spaces in the back. The feedback that I got collectively from businesses downtown is that, let's just say if I had to give a number, let's say it was about 80% in support, and then there was just a couple that were not, and it was mainly the ones that were sitting right there on Hunt Avenue. But for the most part, most of the businesses loved it. They were thrilled about it. The two things that I would say the chamber and the city need to make sure that we work on if this does pass and we are able to put this downtown is exactly what you guys discussed about the construction of those signs, right? We don't want guests coming into town and then seeing this construction signage, but I do understand the challenges that we have with Caltrans regarding that. However, if we can make it look a little bit decorative, which we have discussed, and as Mark said, not too decorative, it still has to, direct traffic, but if we can, we have it on our radar that we know we need that to look aesthetically pleasing. And then the other concern was, that the tables and chairs out there, the cleanliness of that, right? Making sure that we're able to get crews out there, to keep it tidy and clean. We don't have to have tables and chairs out there. We could just have this beautiful art install that people can come and take photos if that's an issue. Obviously, the chamber staff, we're a team of 3, so we're not able to get there on a daily basis and make sure, 24 hours out of the day that it's looking pristine. But I think at the end of the day, the pros for this outweigh the cons. Like I said, I'm looking at a stack of letters of support, and one of the biggest ones from Visit Napa Valley. They do the destination marketing for all of Napa Valley, and they literally said something to me the other day. They said, St. Helena has become the Disneyland of holidays for Napa Valley. They put a lot of their marketing dollars to promote St. Helena during this time, which ultimately promotes our businesses. It brings foot traffic in through the door, which is key, especially during the slower months, especially during our colder season, right? And the excitement that they had regarding this project, we do feel it's going to get a lot of traction, and it's most importantly going to be beautiful and stunning, and it's going to be something that people are going to talk about. You guys know me, I love marketing. That's what I live for. I could just put a tree up anywhere, right? But no one's going to talk about that. Let's do something that is different, that is bold, that is brave, and that stands out, that people are talking about. Let's get people talking about St. Helena out of these 5 towns in Napa Valley, and let's get people here exploring what we have to offer, going in our businesses, staying at our hotels, seeing the historic features that our downtown has to offer, and really supporting our local businesses. So hopefully I answered some of your questions, and I'm happy to answer any more.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Hall, do you have anything else to add or a question?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Last year when we did the Hunt Avenue Hub, there were 3 issues why we terminated that experiment. One was trash cleanup. We didn't have the staff to stay on it. 2 was the reduction in traffic, and 3 was the construction requirements out front and the look and feel. It is a state highway, so there are going to be mandates on how far in advance up and down Highway 29 we begin indicating whether you can or cannot turn. So we're going to be very limited in what we can or can't do there. It doesn't sound like we've done anything to address parking across the board anywhere. So it would be good to maybe have a follow-up report at some point to look at that. I mean, we literally stopped this last time because of these 3 issues. And it sounds like all 3 issues still exist today. And we're back in front of the council asking to do a repeat. So it sounds like a wonderful art installation. I love the holidays. It's my favorite time of year. I just would like to see more planning on this. And I'm in favor of not having tables there, frankly. We don't have the staff. The chamber is saying they're going to put it up, but they're not going to take care of it. The city doesn't have staff to maintain it. So who's going to maintain it if there's any issues over there with tables? So I'm for no tables. And I'd like to see a parking plan or some additional work to find some additional stalls. I know we put 3 in the back last time. That sounds great, but this is the holiday season. Unlike last year where we were under a state mandate to keep our stores closed, that's not the case this year. So I would expect to have a good holiday season with lots of traffic in town. We're going to need places to park, and we want people out of their cars and walking into our shops. Those are my comments. I can't believe it's been planned for a year. We're hearing about it now after it's been advertised, and these 3 things still haven't been addressed. So that's my general concern with it across the board. I love the idea in general. Fix these 3 things would be my vote. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Hardy, anything to add to the mix here? And before we take a vote on this item?
I would like to just address something. This has been planned for a year. It was actually supposed to go in a different location, and unfortunately, we're asked to basically give up that location, and we did that in good faith. And so we are asking in good faith. This is also, as a reminder, a project and collaboration amongst the city and the chamber. This is not just a city project. This puts money towards the holidays. And so I want to be clear on that so that we're all on the same page about that. So I would hope that we will continue to work together in order to find the right spot for this, because I think that is very important. And Stephanie Ikabachi is also on the line, and she also can add just a couple things too if we have the time for it.
Well, let's go to Councilmember Hardy first if he has anything, then I'll move over to the continued public comment. I do see that she's has her hand raised. Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you. I'll wait till the end of public comment.
Thank you. We'll go to public comment in the order that is appropriate, Madam Clerk.
Okay, Stephanie Akabachi, I am going to allow you to speak. You should be able to unmute yourself. You have 4 minutes.
Good evening, Vice Mayor Doring and Council. I'm so happy to be here again. I just want to address some of the comments that Councilmember Hall made to provide some historical context as well. In regarding to fixing the parking, loss of the parking spaces, while I admit there is no simple fix that adds more parking spaces, which would be dreamy, some of the things that we've offered as the chamber is 2 businesses that have been directly impacted by the closure, having businesses on Hunt Avenue. We do have some chamber spaces as well that we could share with them. Other alternatives I would just like to throw out is potentially reopening the entirety of Money Way parking lot, opening those spaces again. We did see from last year that during December is when it's typically colder and maybe raining, and then people aren't seated outside. So that is something to consider, to remove those, which would open, I think that's 9 spaces over there in that parking lot. In addition to temporary signage that could be placed on the corner of Main Street and Adams, directing holiday shoppers down Adams Street for public parking. As we know from studies, there's over 88 spaces available to the public between Adams Street and Library Lane, which is an excellent amount of parking with just a short walking distance to Main Street. So I want to add those context for parking options. We did speak with a business and they had suggested signage to that public parking on Adams, and that's definitely something I think we could do to help guide shoppers that are coming into Main Street. They see a sign, great, there's parking within minutes from town. I think that that's a really excellent solution. I do agree, Councilmember Hall, about the trash. I know that the staff was stretched a little thin last year. So that's, I think, an internal thing. If we wanted to add the seating, could we ensure that there would be proper cleanup? I don't want to offer myself, but I am frequent Main Street visitor, being a resident myself, just throwing that out there. And I think that those were the most concerns. We do have other things around the holiday that would just tie in the Hunt Avenue, bringing, Santa to the Welcome Center, and then Santa could stroll Main Street and visit the holiday tree installment to really tie this in with community and visitors alike. So I hope that some of those options provided some extra context for you.
Thank you. Next public comment, please. Madam Clerk, I'll get to you, Eric.
Phone number ending in 7098. I'm going to allow you to speak. You should be able to unmute yourself. If you need assistance, make sure you press *9 to speak.
Maybe we can move on to the next one and come back to that comment.
I will, yes. Michelle Scott, I'm going to allow you to speak. You should be able to unmute yourself and address the council. You have 4 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Michelle Scott, and I have the salon that's right there on Hunt Avenue. Last year, we were closed for a good portion of it. And I was all about in support of what may help any of the merchants on Main Street because we were all struggling. And because my business was closed, I just kind of played it low key. But my biggest opposition to the closure of Hunt Avenue, again, would be the parking, which it sounds like people are starting to address. And I believe, in my opinion, it's a big disservice to the merchants on Main Street. All day I sit in the window, I see people parking on Main Street, both locals and tourists alike, and then they backtrack onto Main Street to do their shopping. I had a comment with a client today who said that she'll go down Main Street, and if there's parking in front of one of the businesses, she'll stop. If not, she'll swing down Hunt and then backtrack because we're right in the middle of town. So that is the biggest problem for me, as well as it impacts my salon. We do have a lot of older clientele, and they will specifically book early morning appointments so that they can park in front of the salon and not have to hike in from.
It looks like she lost her connection. She's no longer an
Okay.
attendee.
All right. Is there
And
any other
the-
public comment? I'm going to go to Eric if there's not.
No, there is no further public comment.
Did you have anything else to add, Eric?
Thank you,
Councilmember
Mr.
Hall,
Vice
sorry.
Mayor. No,
Sorry.
it's nice to hear the feedback from Amy and Stephanie with regard to some of the things that they're exploring to address those three issues. My concern was just that I hadn't seen any clarity on all three of those as before it came before us here tonight. So it sounds like there's some ideas. I'm all in favor of more signs on Main Street directing traffic to where folks might park. Locals know that we might be able to tuck around somewhere. We've got a favorite secret spot, but when you're coming from Sacramento to shop on our Main Street, and there's, we have no structure anywhere. We're just going to route folks out around. Everybody's going to park over in Safeway or wherever they can. So the only way to get back there is Hunt. So I think the more we can address it, I do like Stephanie's ideas about more signs. I think it's way overdue. Tables or no tables, I don't know. We attempted it last year. I'm for no tables if we don't have a good maintenance plan. Let's just keep it clean, nice and bright, keep it as a photo opportunity for people when they're in town. And the other comment was on the construction zone look and feel. And if there's a way to tone that down and still get along with Caltrans, then that's fine. I would just like to, maybe there's a follow-up point here where maybe I circle back around with Mark and Amy and continue to look at those. That'd be great.
Councilmember Chateau.
Thank you.
And I like to move this to a vote in short order, so just want to
Okay,
move it
great.
along.
Really,
Thank
yeah, I
you.
just really quick had a question for our city manager. If you could, can you provide some clarity on what we're thinking for that park over in the public parking lot? How long we're keeping that open? Because I thought
Right.
that is some good idea, just for even the maintenance of keeping that clean, I could shift over to this, and then also those parking spaces.
Right. I think it's something that we've been thinking about as when we brought the business recovery plan to the council and had a discussion about the parklets on Main Street. The concept internally was to when the parklets arrive on Main Street to remove the tables and the umbrellas from the parking lot off of Oak. And so that would free up the parking there. That can be done earlier. And as we get into the colder months, it's probably reasonable for us to do that. It would add some additional parking for guests and during the holiday shopping season. A couple of other items real quick, just for clarification. One of the key reasons why we began to unwind the Hunt Avenue hub, it was really an experiment tied to the pandemic and the changing rules with restaurants, in particular takeout food. And what we did to close this was to tie it to changes in what you remember to be the state's blueprint for a safer economy. And we tied it to a change from purple to red, which allowed the restaurants at a time when the restaurants would have more indoor capacity. And I'll share with you internally from a maintenance perspective, my recommendation on any tables is, and we didn't write this into the staff report, if we were unable to find volunteers, meaning adjacent businesses or anyone else to volunteer their time, we would need to either not have tables or hire separately some help to maintain the tables, because it was too taxing for a department staff that has been asked to do some additional duties during the COVID time. So absent volunteers, we would either need to contract out or remove tables, take away tables from the mix.
Okay. Councilmember Hardy. Are you finished, Councilmember Shuto?
Yes, and I just want to put another plug for signs, including getting to that public parking lot. I still think many people don't know it's there.
Councilmember Hardy, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Doring. Well, I'm just looking at what we've actually been asked to approve here. The resolution simply approves the temporary closure of Hunt. I think there's been a pretty vigorous discussion with a lot of constructive comments and suggestions that address the concerns that have been raised this evening. And so with the expectation that we'll get a report back from staff regarding what's been done or is being done regarding signage related to parking, the additional parking, when the additional parking at the Moneyway parking lot becomes available, work with Caltrans on, how can we do a more attractive job of dealing with directing traffic there around the closure. And I believe do we have the resources to put tables out and clean or not? I certainly want to see a future report back, but I'm ready to make a motion to approve the resolution simply to authorize closure of Hunt at this time.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, further discussion? I would just add that, in addition to some of the downsides of this that Councilmember Hall laid out, there are folks on Edwards, I think, that take the brunt of traffic. Some of the big trucks have to go through that route to Safeway. So that's not lost on me. I do agree with Councilmember Hardy that we have to give a certain amount of trust to our staff to try to work through some of these issues. We understand what the issues are. It's not going to be perfect. This is a situation where we have legitimate concerns and also legitimate benefits, and we're, as a council, trying to balance those. I take comfort in the fact that it's a relatively short-term project, temporary in respect to 5 weeks, as opposed to a lot longer. I do think our community could stand some good cheer and some joy and some life and some that benefit you can't measure. But I understand the predicament of some of those who are close to Hunt Avenue who have some parking issues. And I would encourage our staff in the chamber to get together and try to find as many parking spaces as possible. I think we did that last time. So we have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution. May I have a roll call?
Yes. Councilmember Hardy,
Yes.
Councilmember Shuto,
Yes.
Councilmember Hall,
Yes.
and Vice Mayor Doring.
Yes, this item is approved. We have authorized staff to close Railroad Avenue, and hopefully they'll continue to work on some of these logistical issues that we are confronted by. Thank you for the public comment and for those who contributed to this item. So we're moving on now to public hearings, agenda item number 10. The public hearing to report on activities related to 723 Hunt Avenue acquisition project funded through the Housing and Community Development Block Grant, program number 21, CDBG HK 0001, and closeout of the project. I'll direct this initially to the city manager, and he can direct it to the staff member that will report out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Our Assistant Administrative Services Director will be presenting tonight.
Thank you. Good evening. On June 16th of 2021, the city was awarded a Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, through the Housing and Community Development Department, HCD, in the amount of $1.5 million for the acquisition of a 4-unit rental property located at 723 Hunt Avenue in St. Helena, to be managed with a 55-year deed restriction for affordable housing available to income-qualified St. Helena residents. This project was done in conjunction with Our Town St. Helena. Escrow closed on the property on June 28th. A total of $1,429,111 in expenses were incurred related to the purchase of the property. The city submitted a financial report and reimbursement request to HCD in August. The remaining $85,250 in unspent grant funds were disencumbered. The grant reimbursement was received from HCD on September 3rd. This public hearing satisfies a requirement necessary to close out the grant. This concludes the CDBG grant update, and we do also have Jennifer from Our Town St. Helena here to present to answer any project-specific questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kellogg. Appreciate that report. Are there any initial questions or comments, clarifying questions or comments from council before I open the public hearing? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing and look to Madam Clerk to see whether there are any public comments.
There are no public comments.
Okay. I don't know if Jennifer would like to make any additional comments. At this point, she's welcome to do so.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I just wanted to express Our Town St. Helena's appreciation for all that the city has done, and in particular, Mandy, to make this happen. She worked really, really hard, and it is just really great to work with her. So just wanted to express that gratitude.
Agreed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One question, just a sort of a logistical, practical question in terms of the tenants, the tenant makeup. How is that affected by this? Are the existing tenants there, or new tenants being brought in to be qualified in some manner? That, I know that's not necessarily part of this, but it would be interesting to hear a little bit about that part of this project.
Yeah, so right now, 3 of the units are occupied by the former tenants. We, in fact, one of the tenants gave notice like right after we closed escrow. So it seemed that she was already in motion to move somewhere else. And so we were able to accommodate one of the tenants who wanted to move into that unit. So after we got the unit cleaned up and ready to rent, we were able to move one of the tenants downstairs into that unit. And she has 3 children living with her, and it has a nice patio. And so it was a nice move for her. So now her unit is being cleaned up and rented. We're in the process of reviewing applications and doing credit checks and that sort of thing. So the unit that's currently available is going to be rented to a very low income household. So to answer your question kind of in a roundabout way, yes, 3 of the longstanding tenants are still there. And we will be renting 1 unit to a new resident.
Excellent. Okay, bringing it back to council. Any further comments from council? Seeing none, I do want to comment that this is a moment of celebration. I know these things seem somewhat perfunctory. Oh, okay, it's another thing. This is a good thing. Our staff should be commended. Our town should be commended for going after this kind of a grant, for making it happen, for preserving housing in our community. So thank you very much, staff. Congratulations on this. Hopefully we can preserve this housing and keep it in our community for the duration. So I'm going to close the public hearing at this point. I don't think there's any, I see a hand raised, sorry. I will, well, I'll close the public hearing, but Councilmember Hardy, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you, Vice Mayor Doring. I just wanted to join in the acknowledgement that this is something to celebrate. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Any further direction, staff, that I need to do, or can I close the public hearing and we file? And yeah, okay, good. So we're on to old business, item 11 of our agenda. Item 11.1 is an informational presentation on Calpers investment return for fiscal year 2020-2021, impacts on city finances. And I know that we have a speaker right here. It looks like Mr. Ira Summer, I believe, is here to give a presentation. I'll turn to first to our city manager to introduce the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Doring. This is really a very important topic. In fact, at last week's League of California Cities annual conference, the conference featured different discussions on the PERS discount rate, the investment returns on each of the 3 different days with 3 series of panels. I attended 2 of the 3 presentations, and what we're going to hear tonight has implications for the city's budget in coming years. I know that Mandy Kellogg on our staff, our Assistant Administrative Services Director, was prepared to make some introductory remarks. So I do want to invite her to share a few words before we introduce Mr. Summer.
Yep, thank you for that. Go ahead, Ms. Kellogg.
Thank you. The city contracts with GovInvest to assist with pension cost modeling into the future. GovInvest has reviewed the status of the city's unfunded accrued liability and the impacts of CalPERS' strong investment returns of 21.3% for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2021. These returns have triggered the CalPERS' funding risk mitigation policy, which will impact future employer contributions. And we have Ira here to go over that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Summer, you have the floor.
Thank you. Well, yeah, virtual floor. I'll take the screen because I have a PowerPoint to work with. So I hope you all can see the PowerPoint. Otherwise, I'm going to have to describe the colors and everything as we go through.
It appears to be coming up. It's there.
It's mostly black and white because I am an actuary by training, and those are mostly the colors we pick. I'm going to spend a little time talking about the pension fund. I'm going to start with some basics because I don't know how much background you all have as city council members about retirement. This is something I work with every day. I've been working with for the last few decades. So a lot of it, is sort of ingrained in my head. But for most of you, because you have real positions with the city, this isn't something you necessarily focus on more than once a year. Then I'm going to jump into the biggest issues of concern, both good and bad, talk about how it impacts your city, and then talk about some of the things you might think about doing moving forward into the future. So in terms of the basics, you contract with the California Public Employees Retirement System to get retirement benefits for the city's employees. You have them, they are split between the category of employees that you have. So your police officers get different benefits than the general employees. Also, depending on when the employees were hired, the employees are entitled to different levels of retirement benefits. In 2012, the California State Legislature passed a law, the Public Employees Pension Reform Act, commonly referred to as PEPRA, that created a standard level of benefit across the state. So whether you work for Napa County or the city of St. Helena or the city of Oakland, if you are hired as a new public employee, as a general employee, beginning after 2013, you are in the 2% at 62 structure, meaning that you get 2% of your benefit of your final pay for each year you work, and you can start receiving that at age 62. If you are a police officer, there's a different benefit structure, which is slightly higher. Pension funding for defined benefit plans are based on a lot of assumptions underlying what's going on. Because in order to fund these properly, the goal of the funding is to have the city pay for the benefits for your employees while they're working. So there's enough money at the time that they stop working for the city to pay for their benefits for the rest of their lives. And in order to do that, Calpers actuaries need to make a number of assumptions, economic assumptions in terms of how salaries are going to grow, how much the money is going to make in the trust, demographic assumptions as to how long people are going to work, which people are going to become disabled and become entitled to disability benefits, which ones will stay until retirement, which ones are just going to go work in another city. The picture on the right is shows that the money going in to pay for this benefit comes from a combination of employee contributions, city contributions, and investment return. To a large extent, most of the money that goes out, goes out to pay benefits and expenses. And 99+% of what goes out the door is actually paying for benefits, not expenses. Calpers is one of the most cost-effectively administered pension plans in the country. Most of the money that gets accumulated actually gets accumulated from investment return. So because you are paying for benefits throughout the career of the employees, and it stays in there until they retire and then die, somewhere between 75 and 90% of the money that goes out the door comes from investment return. So it's very important. The more money Calpers makes in investment return, the less you need to pay and the less the employees need to pay. And I'm taking a little bit of extra time to mention this because I'm going to also spend some time talking about the great year Calpers just had on investment return and the sort of lower expectations Calpers has and most agencies have moving forward on investments. So basically the biggest news for the year, this last year, Calpers earned 21.3% on their investments. This is the strongest year they've had in a while. If we take a look here, year by year, this shows the bars are year by year the investment returns that Calpers has earned. You'll notice this is the strongest return that they've gotten in a decade, and one of the stronger ones that they have seen in the last 30 years. You'll also notice a couple other things to pay attention to because I'm going to come back to them at some point in the future. The red line looks relatively steady. It's not completely steady. The red line is Calpers' assumed rate of return, what they're assuming they're getting for each year moving into the future. You'll notice here in the 1990s that the assumed rate of return was as high as 8.5%. I think somewhere around here in the mid 1990s. They assumed they were getting 8.5%. It dropped down to 8.25% and then 8% right around the turn of the century. Calpers has dropped it down again, 7.75%. And then in 2016, 17, and 18, they dropped it even more, 7.5%, 7.375%, 7.25%, and then down to 7%. According to law, Calpers reviews their assumptions every 4 years. And this is the year that they are doing this. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind, I'll come back to that in just a moment. But before I do that, I want to talk about sort of because of the extraordinary return that Calpers has gotten this year, the 21%. Back in 2015, Calpers adopted a funding risk mitigation policy. And what they basically wanted to do was they realized this for a while, that if they are aggressive in their investments, so the more risk you take, the higher your returns. And if you take high risks, you have a pretty good chance. So for some of the years, especially as we look back here in the late 1990s, Calpers was among the top pension funds in the country on investment return. They were in the top quartile for many of those years. But when things went wrong, the dot-com crash, Great Recession, because they took all that risk, they were in the bottom quartile in the bad years. And because of Prop 13, it is very difficult for agencies, cities, counties in California to quickly generate money to pay for a funding shortfall and increase your contribution rates. The biggest reason why contribution rates shift from year to year are because of the investment returns going up and down from year to year, because the market goes up and down. So what Calpers decided is what they would like to do is lower the risk on some of the investments, not be in the top quartile as often, but lower the chance that they'd be in the bottom quartile so that you wouldn't be hurt during bad years. Now, in order to do that, if they take less risk, they need to assume that they're getting a less return on their investment. So they set in place a policy, a funding risk mitigation policy, that basically says if they beat the assumed rate of return by enough, they will automatically start lowering the discount rate. And depending on how much they beat it by, the more they beat it by, the more they're going to lower the rate. And they adopted this in 2015. And I've already flipped from the previous graph, and I don't know if you memorized the graph. There won't be a quiz at the end of this. But this year, 2021, was the first time since they set that policy that they beat the return by even 2%. It's been a tough investment period. So this year they beat it by over 13%, which means that they automatically are lowering the discount rate by 20 basis points. So the discount rate, which was 7 in the 2020 valuation, is going to be dropped at least to 6.8%. Keep in mind, again, fundamentals of pension math. If there's less money assumed to come from investment return, more money is assumed has to come from your contributions. So the fact that they earn 21%, actually earn the money, lowers your contribution. Your funded percentage, and I'll show this in a little bit, your funded percentage was around 70% in the June 30, 2020 valuation. We're expecting it, if they keep the discount rate around 6.8, to go up to around 80% because of this return. So that's good news. But they are going to be dropping the discount rate. Now, along with this, as I mentioned before, Calpers every 4 years reviews all of the assumptions. They're reviewing the demographic assumptions, and I don't expect to see big changes there because 2020 was, I don't know what the technical term is, weird. Basically, we don't expect a pandemic to happen too often. We hope a pandemic does not happen too often. So the fact that because of the pandemic, some agencies laid off employees, some employees retired sooner than they would have. The life expectancy shortened a little bit. All of that, Calpers is going to spread out over a long period of time, and I don't expect to see much experience change from that. But on the economic side, they are looking at what they can expect to get from their investments. Now, this graph shows the line, the dark line is what the bond rates, 10-year treasury bonds earned each year for the last 40, 50 years. Since some of you are my age and older, you remember the late 70s when bonds were we had hyperinflation. Bonds were up in double digits. They have been coming down since then at a pretty steady pace. All the way through this past year, March of 2020, when the Fed pretty much dropped bond rates down close to zero. So they're not going down any further. But Calpers has about a third of its portfolio in fixed income. That keeps the investment returns relatively steady during down stock markets. So if a third of their portfolio earns, let's call it nothing, 1%, in order to hit 7, the other 2/3 have to earn at least 10%. And that'll happen in good years with the stock market, but it won't happen all the time. And Calpers diversifies their portfolio. Calpers hires some of the best investment strategists in the world. They have $500 billion, so they can afford to hire some of the best people in the world. I don't know if any of you have $500 billion, but if you do, you probably have great people managing your money. So moving forward, Calpers talk to their experts and ask them, if we keep the asset mix the way we have it right now, what do we expect to get in terms of investment return? And their experts basically told them, over the next 20 years, maybe 6.2%. That's the current thinking. And over the next decade, even less, 5.3. So a couple of things are happening right now. Calpers are having this discussion on a regular basis. They will be deciding in their November meeting officially what they're going to do with their asset allocation, whether they get more aggressive or less aggressive. In order to get a higher return, they need to get more aggressive, but that's completely inconsistent with their funding risk mitigation policy that wants them to get less aggressive. But if they keep at this level of risk, the returns are going to be much less than the 6.8 that they're now assuming. So it is likely that they will do some combination. They will shift their asset allocation around a little, and they will probably vote to bring down the discount rate even further than the 6.8 that's already built in with the automatic policy. My guess is they will phase this new change in over time, over a few years, just like they did in 2016, 17, and 18, so that the impact on the city and your budget isn't felt immediately. But it's still going to happen. If they're going to be getting a 6.2% return, then you need to start planning for the discount rate to get dropped to that level, for the returns to get dropped to that level. The sooner you start paying, putting money aside, the less it's going to cost. Pension plans are pretty much a pay me now or pay me later type enterprise. And as I noted from the faucet example in the beginning, the sooner you start putting money in, the more of your money that goes out comes from investment return rather than from your general fund. So how much is this going to impact what's going on? And this slide sort of does this in numbers. Basically, in terms of funded position, again, you were going from 73% was what we expected because of the 21% return. That brought you into the 80s. The drop to the 6.8% dropped it to 80%, still pretty solid. But as it goes up, if it goes up to 6.5 or 6.25 or 6, the lower the discount rate, the lower your funded percentage, the more you're going to have to pay. Showing this in contributions rather than in the unfunded liability. This graph splits out your normal cost, your cost for each year of service as it is earned that you keep paying, which is the orange, and your unfunded liability payments, which are in purple. And if you had just gotten a 7% return and things had stayed like this unfunded liability payment structure looked very similar to what we see for most agencies across California, going up dramatically through the next 3 or 4 years, mostly because of the discount rate drop in 2016, 17, 18, which was phased in over a 5-year period in terms of payments, continuing to grow through about 2030, 2031, when some of the changes that occurred 30 years ago, which were the longest amortization bases that used to be allowed, kicked in or finally get paid off, and then slowly start coming down. Because of the 21% return and the automatic shift to 6.8, what we see, and again, these numbers here capping out for the next fiscal year, you've got about 0.1 million in unfunded liability payments and 700,000 in normal cost. Dropping the discount rate raises the normal cost. Again, cost for each year of service as it's earned. It also happens to raise the cost that employees pay. Some of the employees, the ones hired since 2013, automatically have their contribution rates going up at the same time. So, oh, I shouldn't be moving stuff like this. Now I've ruined the graphs forever. There. Nope. This is why I don't do this sort of thing. I'm a numbers person, not a pictures person. There we go. Pretend you didn't see that. So the 1.1 million unfunded liability contribution, 700,000, a little bit lower, not much of a change. Again, you can see it dropped by 13,000 or 14,000 in unfunded liability payment. The normal cost went up by about 50. As we continue to drop the discount rate, if Calpers drops the discount rate again, what we would see is it would drop normal cost rates going up, unfunded liability payments going up. And the further it drops it down, you see these graphs start moving up. So we don't necessarily know how far Calpers is going to drop the discount rate. But in a few months, couple months, we're going to hear the exact number. Again, my guess is they're going to be dropping it down somewhere in the 6.5, 6.25 range, and they'll probably phase it in over the next few years. So while you will expect some savings in your contribution for the 23-24 year, which is the valuation that the fiscal year that you would start paying from the valuation that ended June 30, 2021, prepare for future costs to be moving up. The other thing to keep in mind, these projections all assume that they're going to hit their funding target each year after that. Now, you got a lot of benefit this year. Your funded percentage went from roughly 70 to 80 because of a 21% return. The market can just as easily take away everything it's just given you. And so we ran one scenario. What happens if there's a serious market correction like there was at the .com? And what you see is your contribution rates start to go up pretty quickly. So part of the news here is that it's been a good year. You should be happy. Most of the news is when it comes to pensions, you really shouldn't be too happy for too long. So, and now the pension police are driving by. I don't know if you hear that. Okay, so I guess the question is, what can you do? Because for a lot of this, I want you to be prepared, but some of this is outside of your control. So you need to be aware of which things are outside of your control and which things are within your control, and be able to take steps that you can to give yourself future budget flexibility. Now, one of the things that you've already done is you have started to pay off your pension unfunded liability faster than Calpers requires. You as a city basically said you're going to follow a 15-year amortization schedule and try and pay it off over time. And now this was prior to this big increase or year of good market, gave you some significant savings. Part of the downside of the change in the market is it lopped off the top of that curve, shortened what you have left of an amortization. So you still have some savings. The line at the top is what you're paying at a 15-year amortization. The line at the bottom is what you would pay with Calpers. And you're still paying it off faster than you would have, and you are still saving some money, projected to save money. And sort of the more Calpers lowers the discount rate, the more you are projected to save moving forward. But at this point, the savings are they're not huge. But they're again a smart move, and they protect you somewhat against what's going on. There are other things that you can do moving forward. And usually sort of in a time like now, when things are starting to go well and the budget is starting to come back, is a time when I normally recommend to cities to start having the discussion about what you would like to do to help to cover your pension costs. Because realistically, funding the pension doesn't get to be number one in most cities' priority lists. It's usually item 2, 3, 4. And as item 2, 3, or 4, you don't normally get to it. But if you plan ahead, if you look at what you may be doing with revenue as it starts to grow and come in, with budget surpluses that come in over time, then, and you decide that you want to allocate a portion of that on a regular basis towards paying off the unfunded liability either on a regular basis like you're doing with this, or on a discretionary basis if the money occurs, then by making those decisions, you're going to sort of help guide yourself and future councils into doing this. Some of the things you might think about doing, talking with budget surpluses, is to make additional payments to Calpers, something agencies have been doing for a number of years. Setting up internal reserves, so you have money internally that you can use in future years. You could make contributions to a 115 trust, which is an external reserve that is where the money has to be used to pay the benefits, the retirement benefits, but you decide when it gets moved from that trust to Calpers, and you decide whether that money is being used to pay for your regular contributions or it's being used to pay for additional contributions to pay off your unfunded liability faster. You can set up multiple different plans for doing this. This is a very short list. The GFOA has a report, Cash is King, which has a lot more ideas. I know I have taken up more of your time than anybody ever wants to talk about pensions. Just trying to get the thoughts out here, answer any questions you have, and suggest that you make a recommendation to staff to bring something back to you at a future meeting. And now I will take a breath and answer questions.
Thank you. Council members, are there any questions, or is there any further comment from our city manager to highlight any points that the manager needs to highlight or wants to highlight?
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Summer, for the presentation. Very helpful. I don't know if you have the additional slide beyond number 21 that has some additional guidance. It would be at the bottom. There was one additional slide we looked at earlier. I don't know if you're able to locate that while we continue questions, but there was also there was a second slide that provided some guidance on April. Do you have a copy of it?
If I can share my screen, I can share that slide.
Okay.
That would be great.
So,
thank you.
So I'll probably speak to just some comments that are prepared on this slide. This is a GovInvest slide.
Note to council, I'm intending to take a break after this item. You always have to take a break after these kinds of items. 10 minutes, so.
And we did ask GovInvest to model the difference between the 30-year and the 15-year clip, which they did this afternoon for us, so we appreciate that. Okay. So this was just some additional guidance that GovInvest was sharing with us. And I think you'll see a lot of what's here is something that the city has been attempting to do as we approach budgets, but to budget revenues conservatively low, to budget expenditures conservatively high, to build in some discretionary savings plans, and a sufficient contingency reserve, in addition to increasing the council has a goal of 25%, or had a goal of 25%. You've moved it to 30. This year, you've really moved it to 35 and set aside some additional contingency funds this year in the current year budget. Consider insurance to protect against known risks, develop multiple contingency plans and long-range planning. And I think it's fair to say that when we know what the discount rate plan is coming out of Calpers sometime later this year, we'll have an opportunity to model that in our long-range financial forecast as we get into budget development discussions in the next year. So it's something that's also important from a employee bargaining perspective to keep in mind that these changes will have some impacts, and we want to be able to potential impacts, particularly a market adjustment that would reduce the funded level of Calpers, and we want to be prepared to, from a contingency perspective, to deal with that. So I'm also happy to answer any questions that the council has about this topic, and I think it's a timely one, and we're really grateful for Mr. Summers' time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Prestwich. I see that Councilmember Hardy has his hand raised, and I'll go to Councilmember Hardy now.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Doring. Just a couple of quick comments. First, I want to thank Mr. Summer for that excellent presentation and for demonstrating unequivocally that a numbers person can indeed have a wonderful sense of humor, which did actually help keep my attention through some challenging material. I really do appreciate that. That's a great skill to have, and it makes a difference. Thank you.
Other comments? I do think we need to give direction back to the manager to bring this back as this develops. I see Councilmember Hall wanting to make comment. Go ahead, Councilmember Hall, you have the screen.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And I would echo Councilmember Hardy's comments. Mr. Summer, I thought it was an excellent recap and summary of the issues, not only of our own plan, but also our plan in context of the rest of the market environment and Calpers' own decision-making. So that was very well done. Thank you very much. You know, on the recommendations list, there are a number of things that I think are certainly worth pursuing. And, you know, on top of this, looks like additional expense heading our way perhaps very quickly. We do have several other work lists that we're still working on as well. So at some point, I don't know how staff organizes the information, but you know, getting back to a 3, 4, 5, 10-year forecast of all of these components would be most helpful for our decision making. It's I find it difficult at times to give thumbs up or thumbs down on things without the rest of that in context. So, and I don't know the best way to do it. Mark, we spoke last week through one of these sessions, looking at the Section 115 trust as a potential. I think it's something that was looked at once before. I'm real thankful that we're paying extra right now to give us a little bit of breathing room and perhaps a little time that some cities don't have. But you know, who knows where markets are going? The world is certainly a I don't know, a swirling, unpredictable thing today. But I think there's a lot of work in this space that we need to look at. I don't know how we get there, but maybe you end up setting up, you know, some sort of separate finance subcommittee that can help chime in on these things, and at least it's on a work list and folks are working through it.
Excellent comments. In a second, Madam Clerk, I'm going to turn to public comment to see if there is any, so I'll forewarn you of that, but I'll turn to Councilmember Chateau at the moment. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you for the presentation. It was good to laugh. And I want to hear public comment, of course, but I was going to second what you said, Vice Mayor Doring, about let's bring back the staff's work and report and recommendations for what we can do.
Okay, thank you very much. Another comment is to keep this on our radar as we're going through priority sessions, and we do that constantly. That's basically our business in terms of how we spend our money. We really need to make sure that this item is included in the lists so that we don't lose track of it. It's always going to be an alternative to be more aggressive in terms of our contributions. Sometimes we may get lost by focusing on other things like all the infrastructure issues that we have, but at least keep it in the discussion so that when we are going through a list of priorities, we can at least say, oh, well, let's think about this issue also. So do you have enough direction? Well, first of all, let me go to see if there's any public comment. Sorry.
There is no public comment at this time.
Okay. Mr. City Manager, do you think you have enough direction here to come back?
We do. This is an informational presentation, but we know that with the forthcoming announcement from Calpers, we're looking at a minimum of a discount reduction from 7% to 6.8%. We've endured, as Ira said, a full percentage point over the last several years, and there's more to come. And we anticipate that something in the 6.5 to 6.25% range is likely spread over some period of time. And so we're going to follow that conversation. We're going to model the impacts for you as we present the budget next year, and we'll continue to itemize the additional PERS contribution as an investment that you're making now. And as a reminder, you've also pre-funded and ended a costly post-employment benefit program over the last several years, and that's reduced the city's future liabilities as well. So I want to make sure we don't overlook the other efforts that we've made as an organization to reduce exposure to future costs down the road. So it's something that we'll follow and be talking about in the coming months again.
Excellent. So I'm asking for about a 10-minute break right now, maybe a little earlier than that, but 10 minutes, come back in 10 minutes. On our next item, I would like the city manager to give some thought to maybe highlighting the areas of most concern rather than going through each line item. And maybe council members have specific questions about a particular item that they're concerned about. I know we're concerned about them all, but I think if we go through that item by item, that would take too much time. So maybe the highlights there. Mr. Summer, I echo the comments from my council members. Excellent presentation. Very well, not entirely easy to understand, but I've been through these before and you did a great job. So have a great night. Thank you for your help here. Thanks so much. Let's take a 10-minute break. it looks like we have everybody who's necessary. I hope our interpreters are keeping up with us. Let's move forward, Mr. Presswich, on item 11.2, quarter one review of City of St. Helena's 2021-2022 work tasks.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Doring. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and you should be able to see the list of items under goal number 1. If I see some nods, okay, good. So I'll touch, as the Vice Mayor indicated, on just some highlights that I want to bring to our attention. And in most cases, if we've recommended a change from Q1, and this is really the first quarter report, tasks that were initially anticipated to finish by about September 30th, we categorize those tasks in Q1 and then each quarter after that. So these items in yellow here, this really references the fact that these were Q1 tasks that we're recommending move to Q2 to provide a little bit more time for their completion. But the column on project status, we have a number as well as a chart that should align with that number, so that they're, from a quick glance, we can see the movement and the progress on these particular tasks. We have not updated the staffing hours for these, but we do need a little bit more time to facilitate the Vine Trail conversation. The city engineer and I have a briefing scheduled shortly, and following that briefing, we'll be scheduling a presentation to the city council. We have some near-term plans to advance the phase 1 work on sidewalk improvements, and a tentative date of October 6th that may slip a meeting or a week to present those recommendations to the ATSC. And we have the Spring Street bike lane striping planned for the next month or so, and weather permitting, that work will finish. Anything that's beyond Q2 has not been adjusted in this report. And I'm happy to pause here and take any questions that anyone has on goal number 1, the tasks under goal number 1.
Thank you. I'll open it to comment. I just wanted to mention that there was another similar looking document that was attached to our agenda, and that may have caused some confusion. It showed not a lot of progress. It was maybe an older version. This is a newer version. So you'd actually have to get through the whole first one and then get to the second one, which I did. But this is the one that's much more updated and shows much more advancement. So I wanted to make that clarification for the council and the public. Any questions so far?
Okay, the other document that Vice Mayor Doran is referring to was our original document a little over 3 months ago. So if you do contrast that version and this version, and we've removed the other one at this point, but if you were looking at it earlier, you can notice the changes in the color coding in particular. So to move to goal number 2, this is the housing related goal. The goal 2A is really an area that has lingered a little bit, and part of that is just the manager not scheduling some meetings to work with our council designees to prioritize some of the housing, short and long-term housing recommendations. So that's something that is a Q2 goal, but we have some work to do on that front. But I'm hopeful that we can complete that work by the end of the year. So no other significant changes on this one. Happy to answer any questions. Okay, so we'll move to goal number 3. This is an interesting one because we have more progress on the items that are farther out and less progress on the nearer term items. Item goal 3A is a fairly easy one. It's almost done. We're really just at a point where we're waiting for a draft of a code language. It's already been to the Parks and Rec Commission, and we intend to bring you an ordinance amendment soon. And that likely will complete goal 3A. In goal 3B, we've made some good progress. It's hard to pick a number on this in terms of progress, but we do have some initiatives that we want to make more progress on, particularly internally within the organization. And that work continues. So while these were identified as Q1 goals, it's fair to say really we need more time for both of those items and would recommend that we move those X's out to the Q2 timeframe. And I'm happy to answer any questions on goal number 3, tasks related to goal number 3.
Not seeing any at the moment. Continue, sir.
Thank you. Goal number 4. This first one is an item that just needs a little bit of extra work. As you know, our water emergency has consumed us in many, many ways, and this is something that is an administrative services department task. We just have we're about a meeting or so away from resolving one issue that will allow that item to be brought to the council for review and consideration. We did have under item B, we did complete and present to the council information on June 8th related to various revenue options. And as you know, at our prior council meeting, we moved forward on a contract for some opinion research work. That will, sometimes when we complete these tasks, it sometimes means there's additional work. This is one of those where completion of the task has led to other work, and we are working on those additional tasks. And the remainder of these items are later term items, planned for later this year, this fiscal year, to spread out the work among our staff. Happy to answer questions on goal number 4.
Council questions? Not seeing any at this moment.
Okay, on goal number 5, all of the items in blue here are Q1 initiatives. You'll notice that goal 5A, this is the Redwood Forest expansion. The only reason we didn't mark this as 100% is that there's an educational component and tie-in that we need to do more work on. And frankly, in preparing for this review, it's very similar to what you see in goal number 6C. I think this was a duplicate at the time we started working on this. So 6C, really the item to fold back into 5A is a reference to a longer term agreement related to the use of the city's property and the Redwood Forest representatives. So in addition to the education component, there's a little bit of legal work as well required to complete essentially goal 5A, and with your permission, we will consolidate those. And we've made a lot of progress on goal 5B as well. This is something that we anticipate having some youth liaisons to bring to our council meetings every other month in the relatively near future. Happy to answer questions about tasks related to goal number 5.
Not seeing any at the moment. We can continue.
Goal number 6 are initiatives that respond. Looks like we need to add an I here. Initiatives that respond to and plan for climate change. And this is another area where a lot of the work has been done on A, but we need to schedule time on a council agenda to complete that particular task. The integrated pest management policy was actually planned for this evening. We're going to bring this back in a month, so that item is ready, but it will be coming back to the council on the meeting of October 26th. And then a couple of this is the 6C will be combined with 5A, and 6D, it's fair to say in some ways, there's been a lot of work done because we adopted the protocol, the interim protocols for the Stonebridge wells, but there are other commitments here, and this 10% is probably underrepresenting the amount of work that's been completed on this front, but we know that there's a lot more work on that front as well. Happy to answer questions about tasks under Goal 6.
Councilmember Shuto.
Thank you. I just had a thought looking at all of these goals with our Napa County-wide Climate Action Committee. We come up with other work that's also going on as we're waiting for the greenhouse gas reporting to come back, and what are the big things that we can work on. We also set short-term goals of working with electrical vehicle infrastructure and making sure we put more of that throughout Napa County and all of our cities. And then also the zero waste events and looking at what we can do. So how does that fit in with our work plan? And is there room to make space, or what is the best process for that? Because both the mayor and I are participating in that work. We have Priya Nixon showing up to those meetings. We're talking about it on that level, and I don't see it in our work plan. So what's the best process for including those things?
Yeah, it's not in our work plan because it's really a separate group with a different agenda. It's really important for us to be dialed into that, which is why we have a partnership of council members and staff tied in. And I think it's fair to say that as items come forward that get done or become opportunities for the city, let's talk about how those get added to our work list so that at least we're tracking on what's happening. And if there's an ask for the city that requires staff time and investment, it would be important to document that along with the successes that do occur. So I would just encourage us to continue to communicate on whatever those are and to consider adding them later in the year. And I do think it's important for us to document any other tasks that get completed throughout the year. And we know that there are other activities that occur beyond what we see on this work plan, that it's important at the end of the year to celebrate and note the accomplishments. So I think it's fair to say something's going to come out of, or numerous items will come out of that investment of time and collaboration.
Thank you. And then my other question was consider alternatives to gas leaf blowers, because that was something that came out of the committee. I asked and got support for putting it on here. We get so many comments about this and community members that are enthusiastic about wanting to help and wanting to move this along. I know we have so much work we're doing right now. And so we're saying Q4, is there anything that we can do for them to help us?
Well, the reason it's Q4 partly is that the person that is going to manage that that policy issue is also the lead staff member on the transition of City Hall to Napa Valley College. And that's an extraordinarily complex transition. It's extremely time consuming. The good news is this is the same person that worked on the ordinance in Yountville. And we have an open line of communication with the town of Yountville to learn from their experience. And they're really in the early months of the implementation. It's reported to be going very well. And generally, if we follow an agency that's gone through something like this near term, there are a lot of terrific lessons learned. But Priya Nixon worked on that issue at the town of Yountville. And when her time is cleared up after this transition, which should happen mid-spring, this is why we've pushed, from a workload management perspective, we've tried to compartmentalize the tasks into different quarters to help our staff manage the large number of initiatives on their plate.
Thank you.
On that matter, by the way, I understand the urgency there, and I have been receiving quite a bit of commentary myself. Sorry, getting a phone call there. One of the things we have to keep in mind is that even though another jurisdiction may have an ordinance in play and that it is successful, we have to keep in mind that when we work through an ordinance, it is consistent with all of our remaining municipal codes. Our code is a lot different, and so, for example, we may have to work on consistency with a noise ordinance or other ordinances. So it's not as easy just to develop the ordinance and be done with it. We want to make sure that it kind of ties together with the balance of our municipal code. So it's a little more complicated, but I definitely feel the pain because I've been getting a lot of citizen input on that. So the sooner we can get that done, the better. So thank you. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. And the reason it's on here is because the council committed to this and directed staff to work on alternatives to gas leaf blowers. So it's the good news is it is part of our work plan and commitment to move forward. And then finally, this is the catch-all category, which is one small line item, but a very significant amount of work. This is the transition to Napa Valley College. We have submitted our plans to the Division of State Architects. We think those plans are going to be with them for about 3 months. So it's only been a couple of weeks, but there's a lot to this, from telecommunications to moving to the tenant improvements, even connections to utilities and an auxiliary locker room for our police department. It's a tremendous lift. Our number of our department directors are meeting on a regular basis to touch base on the project, and their help has really helped refine the transition. It's going to be a good move, but there's a lot of work associated with it. And later this spring, it's going to add quite a bit of disruption to City Hall for a few weeks when we actually go through the formal transition over to the new space. But I know you'll all be there for the ribbon cutting when we celebrate the transition.
Just a question there, Mr. Presswich. How does that relate to the status of our lease? I guess, more pointedly, we're not paying any rent right now, are we? And
No.
we won't be paying any rent for a while, I assume.
That's correct. The clock doesn't really start until after the plans come out of the Division of State Architects. So what our plan will be is to go to bid on the tenant improvements and begin to initiate construction as quickly as we can for at least the non-safety side of the house, not the police department side. We probably will do it all together, but it's still an open question. But the rent wouldn't start for 3 months after the point in time where the plans clear the Division of State Architects. There are not a lot of tenant improvements on the non-police portion of the building. And then we have, there's no rent for the police side until we move in, but we have 6 months to move in on that side. There's a little more work to do on building offices on that side of the building. So we'll probably phase the construction in accordance with the lease.
Even though we don't have the actual details of the construction and the approved architectural plans, is it a time to start reaching out to potential general contractors, or is it too premature?
We haven't reached out yet, but we can, and I think our plan also is to bid earlier, to go to bid a little earlier, and adjust if necessary based on the feedback from the Division of State Architects. But these are pretty straightforward tenant improvements, and I'm hopeful that there won't be a lot of complexity with our review. And in fact, it would be great if they could move it a little faster.
All right. Further comments from council, and then we're going to look to public comment here in a second. Colleagues, anything else to add or specific direction on some of the items that Mr. Presswich has laid out? I know he's offered a few minor recommendations. Other thoughts? I think it appears that you have probably consensus to make a few of the changes that you suggested. Any further thoughts, Mr. Presswich? I'm going to go to public comment here in a second, see if there is any. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment?
There is no public comment.
All right, we'll close that. All right, does that finish this out?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. So we're going to move on now. Make sure I'm not muted. Okay. Item 11.3. The item is in-person city council boards, commissions, and committees discussion. Mr. Presswich.
Yes, I'll be substituting for the city clerk tonight. And this is a continuation of a discussion about the venue upon which we hold our public meetings. And when the COVID pandemic arrived, adjustments were made at the state level that allowed for the use of this technology for virtual meetings, really from a safety perspective. And that work continues. The state and the governor just signed a bill, AB 361, that allows these types of meetings to continue to occur via teleconference. this bill went into effect already. And in the bill is language that states that since implementing these teleconferencing meetings, this is really across the state, the meetings have been productive. They've increased public participation by all members of the public, regardless of their location in the state and the ability to travel to physical meeting locations. It's protected the health and safety of civil servants and the public, and reduced travel costs incurred by members of state bodies, and reduced work hours spent traveling to and from meetings. When you look at different public agencies, there are a number of different practices that are employed today. So our local school board, for example, is meeting in person. And having recently been at one of their meetings, they have approximately 30 seats. They're not 6 feet apart, but they are distanced from each other more than what we remember from when we previously were in that room. They do take public comment via telephone if someone would like to make a comment on a particular item. We are presenting to you tonight a couple of options. One would be to continue with this virtual meeting format and check in monthly on your interest in continuing the virtual environment or a preference for returning to in-person meetings. The second option is to begin a transition to in-person meetings at some date. There would be the school district has implemented guidelines in their boardroom that allows for these meetings in compliance with COVID guidelines. They do require the use of face coverings at the meetings at all times inside. There are also additional guidelines related to anyone that might have COVID symptoms would be discouraged from and not allowed to enter the facility. We would encourage the use of hand sanitizers, and they would provide for some air purifiers in the boardroom. There's an additional form of a hybrid where we can allow the meeting to be done virtually. And as you know, we're taking public comment by email if the public comments are submitted to us in advance, but we can also, and we allow for people to telephone in via the Zoom format. An additional option would be for us to allow a member of the public to make a reservation with a city clerk in advance of the meeting with some cutoff time, and we would be able to call that person at specifically the time the item is up for public comment and receive that comment. That would be an alternative to someone that might not feel comfortable participating in an in-person meeting at that particular time. So those are some options that we've outlined, and we're happy to talk about those alternatives and receive feedback.
Very well. Let's look to see if there's any public comment before I get to the council for their observations on this.
There is no public comment.
Okay, we'll close public comment. Mr. Hall, do you have any thoughts on this matter as to which direction we should go?
Thank you.
Questions for staff?
I really don't have too many questions for staff. I know this is I think the second time that we've sort of touched on the topic. My general thought hasn't changed too much, which is if we're prepared to go back to the schoolhouse and we can function there perfectly fine without any additional burden on staff, then I'm fine with that. It didn't sound like the school district was at that point last time around. Maybe the rules have changed a little bit that allow a little bit more flexibility. I still don't know exactly what that means across the board, but I'm kind of fine either way. I think we're pretty good on Zoom. I kind of prefer to stay in Zoom. That's my personal opinion just for now. I think we've got plenty to handle otherwise.
How about you, Mr. Hardy? Do you have any comments or thoughts about the direction we should go in this matter?
Thank you, Vice Mayor Doring. My inclination is to think that the right time to make a transition to Village Hall is when staff has been able to complete the transition to the Napa Valley College space. My gut feeling is that even though it may be hard to see or quantify, that changing how all our public meetings is run just raises another hurdle for staff to cross at a time of a pretty challenging transition in terms of staff time. So I do like the idea of returning to public meetings. I think we can make that work with the school board policies, but I think it's premature with the transition to a new city hall in process.
Thank you. Excellent comments. Councilmember Chateau.
I'll just say I agree with that. That sounds good.
Thank you. Just to follow along on some of the comments, Mr. Presswich, what generally is the feeling of staff in terms of the logistics, and how is, we want to check in on our staff. We could speak for staff, but the staff better than we do in terms of how that works. I mean, I agree with Councilmember Hardy. I'm inclined not to move to the public meeting just yet, so I'm in alignment with my colleagues. But what are your thoughts in terms of the rest of the city?
Well, I think that for a couple of reasons, I sort of I wish that we had an Insta poll available and we could just simply ask our staff to weigh in anonymously on that. But from a staff perspective, we continue to have staff.
I apologize for putting you on the hot seat, but I just we
it's
need
okay.
to know whatever you know.
It's okay. One of the important considerations that we're working with right now is just working with the public health orders. We have not required our staff that are working in City Hall to be required to work back at the building yet. So we're staggering staff. We're reducing the number of people in the staff. People are working remotely. There's a teleworking policy in place that has not been discontinued. The staff have been notified that once we begin that transition, there will be a 30-day notice period before the staff come back full-time into City Hall. But because of we're really at the tail end of what probably would be considered the third wave of COVID right now, that really started earlier this summer, and we're now hopefully on the tail end of that. There's a concern that there's another larger wave coming, just as it did last winter. And until we learn more about where the state is headed on COVID rules, we have no plans at the moment to, in the next 2 to 4 weeks, I don't anticipate providing that notice to employees and getting everybody back full time. Part of that is really to reduce the probability that if we're fully staffed at City Hall and someone has a COVID exposure, then all of us that have some proximity to that individual are going to be away from City Hall for 14 days. And I'm proud to say that throughout the entire COVID event, that's not happened to our police department, our library, our fire department, or our City Hall. So, and our field operations. So we've done a nice job of working together to avoid and reduce the probability of transmission of the virus, but it has, at all times, there's a risk that happens. And I think the staff, my experience with COVID, with the teleconferencing and the use of Zoom is that it works pretty well. I think from a sharing of screen perspective, it's very easy. We've come to use it a lot for our staff meetings to, again, reduce the potential for transmission of the virus. So it's something that we've continued to do, and if we meet, and we've only met a couple of times in person, we do primarily outdoors. So I think our staff has found it easy, particularly if it's a late meeting, Vice Mayor Doring, and there's a drive home, right, that for some of our staff might be more than 30 minutes. So that's been convenient.
Okay, it looks like we're aligned. I guess I should pursue the alternative. I'm not entirely in favor of it, the one to make the reservation. I think that's somewhat logistically pain, lack of a better word. It might work. There may be something there. I think my preference is to maintain this sort of the status quo right now, but to look at that a little bit further, I'm not inclined to make that change. Council members may have other ideas. Councilmember Chateau.
I like the idea of a reservation because I've had people ask me to do that. Like, hey, could you send me a text when the item comes up? And I tried it once and I really can't do it. I can't focus and also think that, I need to text this person. And I get it. It was a busy parent feeding kids. And like, they really wanted, at that time, it was their kid to make a public comment. So if there is a way that we could just try it out and see how much work it is, I think that there is some benefit, if I'm understanding it right. Basically what we're saying is if you make a reservation about when you want to make a public comment, somebody on city staff will text you or call and say, it's your time now. Is that right?
That's correct. And it's really a page out of the school district's book. They've used it. I was in the audience recently and watched them use it. Not a lot of people took advantage of it, but there was a person or two that did use it.
So I'd love to try it if it's not terribly cumbersome.
Other council members' thoughts on that item? I mean, I'm okay with trying it, but I know that it seems like the behind the scenes operations are so smooth that it seems somewhat simplistic, but it's a lot of work. I know Cammie can attest to that. And so, it's somewhat complicated. There's a lot going on during the meetings, but if we want to try that, thoughts, Councilmember Hardy or Hall on that? You want to give that alternative a try?
I have no idea how much work it is behind the scenes. So, I'm fine trying anything actually. And if that works, if it's helpful and it's not creating an undue burden for staff right now, then I'm fine trying it too.
Okay, thoughts, Mr. Hardy?
Well, I see problems just in a variety of ways in terms of experimenting, if you will. If we get a new process going and then we find that it really is problematic on the back of the house side, then we have a different kind of problem when, after creating the expectation that this is available to members of the public, we announce that, oh no, we're not doing it anymore, or we're just stuck with the back of the house challenges. So I guess I'm not ready to endorse anything there until I hear something from staff that indicates a determination that what we're looking at is going to work well from a staff perspective. That's really the key for me. I'm not sure we're there yet. If I'm missing something, Mr. Press Switch, please let me know. But I didn't have the sense that staff has really had the opportunity to vet these alternatives in terms of how it works on the back of the house side.
We would need some time to transition to a telephone reservation concept, and I do want to acknowledge that the behind the scenes operation, when we first started, it's always been fairly smooth from the very beginning, but there is a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes. And our staff does such a great job of making it look really smooth. Cammie had to triage my ability to participate in the meeting tonight, and probably behind the scenes people didn't realize, but she and I were both frantically trying to work on getting me into the panelist role. But our staff does a really good job of behind the scenes making sure that these meetings run smoothly, and we've had a lot of redundancies built into the way we've staffed up on these. This would be an extra, item that would require us to develop some procedures and methodology and test out. And the good news is we have people to talk to learn their lessons and try to apply what they've learned from that experience. So I don't know that it's that much net heavy of a lift. It's just making sure that we announce it. There's a bit of a part of that we would want to amplify that opportunity for the public so that the public knew about that option as well. So there's a bit of marketing that comes with this, I think, that all of us would share. But it's really a matter of having an email likely sent to an inbox by a certain time each day.
Well, then my question turns then to timing, since you've explained, thank you, that preparation is the key, and without thinking about it much at all, I think, well, that's got to be at least a 30-day ramp up if outreach and just making sure that internally everyone's well prepared. We're near the end of September, so then I think, okay, well, is that first meeting in November? Because if it's not somewhere in there, I'd say pretty quickly you get to a point where you don't really want to make a significant change until first of the year. So I think that's really the choice if we're going to take it on. Are we ready to move forward and get that going before the holiday season complicates everything for everyone? Or is this something that set for the beginning of the new year? That's how it looks to me.
Vice Mayor Doring, I just wanted to share a little bit about AB 361, which will come back to you.
Yes, go ahead.
We'll come back to you as an item at a future meeting, obviously, for you to make the findings to continue with the virtual format. The one thing that it does require is that we be under a state of emergency, and we currently are, obviously, with the governor's orders and COVID-19, but there is some speculation that he may lift that state of emergency by the end of the year. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen with COVID, so it could continue past that date. But if that was lifted, then you would be going back to in-person at some point in the future. So just keep that in mind as you discuss the virtual option.
Okay, thank you for adding that. I'm feeling that we may not have a consensus on this alternative reservation idea. Maybe we do, I don't know. I mean, it seems we want to put it back on staff. I don't know. Maybe the direction is have staff take a closer look at what it takes to get that done. Maybe talk to the district to see how they're doing it. If it's relatively easy, I think it's important to acknowledge the point that Mr. Hardy made is, once you go into experimental mode, that really is the mode. People grow to expect things, and then that becomes the standard procedure. So we have to be prepared to do that. You put it on as an alternative, so if the staff is prepared to go in that direction and go in fairly short order, then I will consent to that for the good of the order, to just see how it works, knowing that it may, once we get going, it may be something that folks expect.
We have 4 meetings through the end of the year, and I think the first meeting that we would be able to, the earliest we would be able to transition would be on October 26th.
Okay. Other comments, contributions from anyone else on this issue? Seeing none, we'll move along. We're on new business now. Item 12.1, discussion and direction regarding a request from Councilmember Hall to fly the POW. I think it's more than that, the MIA POW flag beneath the California flag on the governmental flagpole in perpetuity. I'll let Mr. Preswich introduce the item. I did notice some inconsistencies between what was asked, what was written by Mr. Griffin and what is in the report. So we'll have to kind of sort that out. And
Okay.
maybe Mr. Hall, after you introduce the item, maybe Mr. Hall also has some comments to make. Thank you.
Okay, so this is we from time to time receive requests to fly flags on the city's ceremonial flagpole. We have 2 flagpoles. This is a request to fly the POW flag beneath the California flag on the governmental flagpole in perpetuity. And the staff report includes as an attachment the city's adopted flag policy for outdoor display of governmental and non-governmental flags. This policy can be modified by the council at any time, and so you may want to consider modifying the policy or providing direction to the staff to bring back modifications to the policy at a future meeting in order to accommodate the request or some form of accommodation of the request. Alternatively, you may consider a specified period of time instead of in perpetuity, as you do with other potential requests that arrive from time to time. And I'll stop there and invite Councilmember Hall if he would like to add anything else to what I've mentioned.
Sure, thank you, Mark. This was a request that came in from a local veteran who asked that I work to help agendize the item. I agree with Mark's summary of what's here. What are the options before us? The one difference is that this flag actually is required to be displayed below the U.S. flag, and the California flag and the other ceremonial flags would, because we have a two-pole system, those flags would reside on the ceremonial pole. Otherwise, I think the rest of the request is there. I know that I believe the post office flies it in perpetuity today, I believe. There are 6 other national holidays where it's required to fly on a variety of other government buildings and offices. So, this is just a request from a variety of locals in town. There's a submission, I believe, from them, which I don't have in front of me, but with I guess a half a dozen signatures attached to it. So that's all I have on it.
Councilmember Chateau, I see that your hand is raised. You have the screen.
Thank you. I'm just confused now. So where would this fly, and is it changing the flags as they are now?
This would fly on the governmental flag below the California flag, on the governmental pole below the California flag.
Okay, I thought I heard Councilmember Hall say something.
Did I say that incorrectly?
Yeah, that's what the staff report says. That's actually incorrect. To fly this flag, it must be flown below the U.S. flag.
Okay.
If we had a single pole, it would be the U.S. flag, the POW flag, then the California flag, and then other ceremonial flags. Because we have a 2-pole system, it's the U.S. flag and the POW flag, and then the second pole, you would start with your state flag and then the rest of the ceremonial flags.
I think we might want to check into I agree with what you're saying, Councilmember Hall. The idea of the state flag being sort of analogous to a ceremonial flag, I don't know if that's necessarily correct. I'm in favor of flying it. You are correct. Actually, the post office is now required as of November, I think, of last year to fly it in perpetuity, as are many other federal buildings. So it is flying at our post office right across the street from our city hall. I'll go to you, Councilmember Hardy, in a second. My concern is basically just making sure that we don't willy-nilly change policies and procedures as we move along. That if our policy is not working for us, then we change the policy and then we work from there. Because my concern is, and I'm supportive of the request, my concern is somebody coming along later and saying, well, you just changed the policy, without really changing it for this one item in an ad hoc matter. And now I want to come in and fly something that would be sort of an affront to our community, because I want to change the policy. So as long as we stay within our procedures, here's a policy, maybe we need to amend the policy, bring it back, and then make the change. And And then I guess I have some minor concern about the state flag not flying on the government pole. And I stand to be corrected on the legality of that. That's not something I have checked out. Councilmember Hardy, any thoughts?
Yes. Well, I took just a quick look at related state legislation over the last 10 years and also the new federal law. And what I see in the text of those bills were in federal law, and this is where you see it most clearly. The statute says that a POW MIA flag flies whenever the U.S. flag flies, and I think that's the right way to think of it. Perpetuity is a long time, and I think it's not the right way to frame it as a formal action. I think tracking the language in the federal law really makes more sense. I also see that's how it was adopted in at least one other municipality. Again, tracking the language of federal law. California has taken a different approach and simply requires that the flag be flown on state buildings on certain occasions and certain dates to observe the memory of POWs and those missing in action. So and we have had a period where the federal rule until recently had designated holidays on which the flag must be flown. My own inclination is to think that focusing on occasions is actually, in some ways, a better way to draw attention to the concerns and the cause behind the flag. I think that may get diluted a bit if the flag is always flying, but I have no objection to the request. I just think we should pay some attention to the details because it does require a change in policy, and I think the easiest way to craft that is with reference to federal law. That's to say, by using the framework of the federal law. I don't think we need to refer to that statute, but I think we should look at how it was done there and preparing an amendment to our policy. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not sure if, well, I'm supportive of that. I don't know what federal law is, so it's kind of hard for me to weigh in on what that turns out to be. Is your thought, Mr. Hardy, if that we're allowed to fly that, the flag that's being requested to fly, maybe in perpetuity is not the right term, but at the same time as our U.S. flag, and that could be, 300 days of the year, you're okay with that, right?
Well, right. I just think that's a better way to frame it.
On certain holidays.
Yeah, I just think that's a better way to frame it. It's
okay.
If the U.S. flag is up there, then the POWMIA flag is up.
Okay, and I'm supportive of that.
That's all I'm borrowing from the framework of the federal statute. I think that's an appropriate and helpful way to do it.
Understood. Do you have direction there, Mr. Presswich, to come back with a change policy to allow for that flag to be flown a long time?
I think we'll work with the city attorney's office. I believe you still have an opportunity for public comment.
That's right. I'll turn to Madam Clerk and see if there is any public comment.
There is no public comment at this time.
And I did note that Mr. Griffith did send in a letter. I did read his letter with the signatures of several community members, which was appreciated. Okay.
So I'll work with the city.
Sorry.
So from a direction standpoint, I'll work with the city attorney to provide some options or recommendations for an update to the city policy. While we were talking, I was consulting another city's policy, the city of San Jose, which often has a battery of attorneys and fairly current policies. So I noticed there are probably other opportunities for some updates to our code as well, or our particular flag policy.
Very good. So we've made it to the end. Thank you for indulging me. You all did a great job. Have a good night. I'm gonna go ahead, Eric.
Sorry, thank you. Vice Mayor, I just wanted to thank you for your speed, your exactness, your levity in jumping in and moderating tonight. It was very well done. Thank you
Much
much.
appreciated. I appreciate your contributions. All of the council members and staff, thank you for your contributions. Have a great evening. Good
Thank
work.
you. Well done.
Thank you.